Welcome to the very first full video episode of the Founder Files. This has been a work in progress for quite a few months now, and I'm so excited to say that we are finally here. Now, before I get into this specific episode, let me just introduce why we are here and why we're making this change. And, over the past year and 3 months already that we've been doing the podcast for, we finally realized that our niche, our point of traction is the fact that we're providing a space where you can essentially listen in on a fireside chat with an entrepreneur and then engage in an authentic conversation. And doing that just over audio isn't quite the same as being able to actually watch that conversation and feel like you're participating in it. So that's why we've decided to move over to video, and this podcast will be available on YouTube now as well. And then obviously the audio is still available on all the other channels. So with that in mind, you're also going to notice a few differences in the first few episodes. And the reason why is because before the transition over to video, there's a few episodes that were recorded beforehand. And as you can see, anyone who follows our content on LinkedIn, my background is now totally different to what it was previously, and that's because I've moved houses. So with this episode, you'll notice that the intro and outro is obviously going to be slightly different in terms of the way I'm dressed, the way I look, and what my background is. And that's just because I've moved. But the reason why I waited is because this guest was of such a high caliber that I really wanted to be deliberate about making sure that this first episode of video was with this person to really launch this off and do it properly. So without further ado, I'll now introduce our next guest, which is Rich Mulholland. He is a very competent speaker and very well-known speaker. He's accumulated over 20 million views on his videos across the internet, across YouTube and other channels. He's an author of 3 books, and he is also the founder of Missing Link, which is a company that helps CEOs present, persuade, and communicate more effectively. And it goes without saying that Richard is an absolute master of persuasion, speaking, and selling. And in terms of doing a first video episode to engage on that kind of energy and to feed off of that kind of learning in terms of how to persuade more effectively, tell your story even better, and convince customers and stakeholders that your business is the one to pay attention to, I think this is definitely the right guest. So I hope you enjoy this episode, and I hope you enjoy this new chapter of the Founder Files.
Passion is a key ingredient of persuasion, right? Like as a start, like your own give a shit tank has to be full. We always say one of the fundamental rules of presentation, and I would argue persuasion generally, is that your audience can never enjoy receiving a presentation more than you enjoy delivering it.
Welcome to the Founder Files, the podcast that's like eavesdropping on a conversation with a successful entrepreneur over a fireside chat. Join me, Cameron Coutts, through this unique experience of unfiltered stories and insights from scaling founders around the globe as they share their ups, downs, and everything in between. Rich Mulholland, thank you for joining me on the Founder Files. I've been really looking forward to this conversation because you're one of the most interesting people to talk to. You're incredibly persuasive and energetic, exciting, and I love the fact that we're approaching this from an unscripted perspective and both super pumped about that. So I think just to kick it off, you want to tell me a bit more about yourself and your context and, how you got to where you are now.
Okay. So first of all, thanks so much for having me. It's amazing. I love the show. I particularly enjoyed your episode with Jason Bagley. So if people haven't heard it, they should go back and listen to that one. I'm a Scotsman. I moved to South Africa when I was 9. I absolutely love it here. I've been entrepreneurial my entire life. I knew that starting something, I think I'm quite unhireable. And I knew that starting something was something I always wanted to do. But I'm driven by frustration rather than passion. I think that people talk about chasing your purpose. I think it's bullshit. I think we've been lied to a lot about this idea of purpose and start with why. I think it's complete crap. We can get into it later. But I think that finding purpose in frustration is the entrepreneurial spirit. So I see things in the world that I hate and I want to fix them. And once I hate them enough, like it bothers me, I can't sleep until I do. And that kind of is what got me started running Missing Link, a presentation and persuasive communication business 26 years ago. And bad decisions and distractions have brought me to where I am now, which is a not scaled, not big, not like I do get frustrated about where I am right now. And maybe that's something we can dig into.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to. I think I just want to unpack that first topic about frustration versus purpose, because exactly to your point, we've been pumped so full of this rhetoric around purpose and intrinsic motivation being important, and even for me as a psychologist, I know the theory of motivation. Tell me more about this frustration side and how that kind of drives you.
Well, so I think from an entrepreneurial point of view, generally speaking, that's how we're grown, right? So entrepreneurs do one of two things in the world. And again, this is my definition. I'm very, very happy for it to be challenged. My definition is that entrepreneurs do something different to, I guess, just people who maybe start businesses. If you run a franchise of a steers, yes, you're an entrepreneur, but you're a small business owner. You've not really gone through things. You're kind of buying something off the shelf and you're just trying to do it as an investment vehicle. Whereas entrepreneurs tend to look at things that exist in the world and they either want to fix a problem or fill a gap. But generally speaking, it's because they've looked at something and think, not, I love this. They don't do what they love. That's the other lie. Do what you love. You'll never work a day in your life. No, I didn't start a presentation company because I thought presentations were amazing. I started it because I thought they were shit. And when I was an AV technician, I used to sit at the back watching people present and thinking, why are you so bad at this? And for me, that's where I saw an opportunity, and opportunities exist more in things that frustrate you. And because if they frustrate you, they frustrate other people. Whereas I find that when you do something that everybody already loves, generally they love it because it works. And there is already somebody fulfilling that need. Now, it's not to say you can't make money in that space by going deeper, but generally speaking, when you do that, you find something that everybody loves and you find the one thing that they hate. And then you've built a version of that new thing, fixing that one thing. So that's my idea. Is I think that we should, instead of chasing our purpose or what is our purpose, I think that we should find purpose in the problems that we solve.
That's such a good point, because I think about, why I started Metavolve in the first place. And like, I could explain the more positive oriented purpose around what we do around helping entrepreneurs get their business to the next level. And like, everyone's like, cool, man, like you sound like a marketing agency or like something else. But the main frustration that it came from is the fact that these statistics that we know is like, how can entrepreneurs avoid just becoming another failure statistic? There's 90% of startups fail, then like 80% of scale-ups fail. Like the cards are stacked against us. And my frustration is, this shit's so hard. It's so hard to be able to take a business forward and have the grit and tenacity to be able to do that. That my frustration is, why is this so difficult when I believe so much in entrepreneurship? And that's actually why I started it. And that's what still keeps me going to this day. So just in terms of your perspective on frustration and purpose and like looking at myself, I totally buy into that.
Yeah, I mean, everything you said there is you take something that you like, you look for a problem in it, and then because you're invested enough in the topic, that little hurdle that we got to go through, that why is this so difficult? It doesn't make sense. And actually doesn't make sense because it's, in fact, it was easier sometimes. Like 26 years in, I'm still not sure what the code is. But that alone is a problem we're solving. And I guess that's the underlying question would be, is this a problem we're solving or a gap worth filling? And my problem in my business, for what it's worth, is I added the answer to me. Is this a problem we're solving to me? And I didn't change that to for the world, because it turns out that I think being a better presenter, better communicator, better conversationalist is an absolute skill that everybody should have. Like, I instill it in my children. I think it's so important. The world doesn't care. Everyone thinks they're good enough and nobody needs it. And 26 years in, I'm still trying to convince people that they should be better at presenting, but they generally don't care because we actually accept the low bar for presentations are so consistently bad that we actually find that acceptable. There's no other skill in business in which being that shit would be acceptable. And it's a problem for me. So I think that if I was to go back to past me, I'd punch myself in the face a few times. And then I'd say, just make sure you make the caveat that it's not about what you care about. What's big in your world isn't big in the world. You got to find shit that other people care about.
And starting with frustration makes sense to me now, because I picture all these terrible public speakers where they present their graphs and their data and statistics, and then they end up talking like this in a monotone because they're presenting information and they're trying to educate you. But the point is that you could basically take the same data, the same kind of information. And if this person was super frustrated about the fact that look at what this shit is basically telling us, and going out there, you can take the same person, add a little bit of frustration into the mix, and suddenly they become more persuasive as a speaker.
100%. So it's all structure, no skill. The biggest thing when it comes to public speaking is that we think that it's a skill issue, that we don't have the presentation skills, when we just lack the presentation structure. This is a reason why a lot of people in the startup space will share their pitch deck, because they're saying, this is a pitch deck that raised me millions of dollars. That's fantastic, but it's because it's a structured flow of narrative. And their assumption is, well, you can, you're probably going to be fine with the skills parts. And that's what we believe as well. But most people don't see it that way. So they come at the problem from the wrong side. And it frustrates me because it's so hackable. This is a skill, being a better conversationalist. And when I say presentation, by the way, 90% of presentations you do in your life will not have slides, and the other person won't realize they're being presented to. It is you going through material that exists inside your brain, sharing that as material to somebody else in a conversation like this, and nobody feels that they're being presented to. It's only that 10% where you're actually on stage, ladies and gentlemen, and doing that kind of stuff.
But to your point, it's exactly what I'm thinking about now. I mean, I'm going to a VC networking event tonight. I'm going to Africa Arena over the next 2 days in terms of a conference. And obviously now I'm going to be engaging with a lot of people in my target market, thinking, all right, okay, cool. What's this like? Because I mean, we're 2 years in, right? And we're constantly repositioning, pivoting, trying to figure out what's like this simple narrative to make it easy for people to explain, that I'm almost overthinking it, to be honest. And it's like, I've got this, trying to figure out the script. And to your point there is knowing that I'm going to be talking to people and kind of presenting to them, but you can tell instantly when someone's just repeating off of a script rather than telling you an organic story. So in that situation, how do I present to people organically without making them feel presented to?
Okay, so Alex, we're going to do this. Hey, Alex. Hi, I'm Richard. You're going to add some background crowd noises as if we're at a cocktail party to this conversation. I don't know if I'm allowed to ask you to do that, but please. All right. So, Cameron, here we go. So, we're at this function. We're at a bit of a mixer. And I walk up to you and say, hey, man, nice to meet you. I've actually heard your podcast before. I really, really enjoy it. Tell me, what is it you guys actually do? Go.
We help entrepreneurs become more successful through holistic strategy and people services.
What does that mean?
It means that...
What's holistic strategy as opposed to strategy?
Okay, so holistic strategy is essentially, we've got a unique methodology which takes everything from vision through to execution. So most people, when they think about strategy, they actually just think about the market, which is, don't get me wrong, is the most critical and important thing about how you're going to grow the business. But other strategic decisions that you need to make in terms of how you hold people accountable, how you structure the business, what are the values, culture, and governance you need in order for this to run without you having to be present as the founder? What's the business model? How are you going to execute this? How are you going to measure your execution? How are you going to monitor and evaluate your progress, even though the world's going to change and nothing actually goes according to plan? So how does a strategy work when the future isn't foreseeable? That's what we mean by a holistic strategy model. It's every strategic decision that you need to make that is going to make your business more sustainable as it continues into the future.
Okay. So right now I'm having to do some heavy lifting. That's a great description. I'm having to do some heavy lifting to work out where that means to me, because you lack a bit of context in me, and we're trying to figure this out. The first thing I would say to you is try be the second person to give this information. So if you can lead with you might meet somebody, what they do, or you ask them a question, or you chat a bit about them. Hey, yeah, I'm super interested in startup founders or in people like this. Tell me a bit about what it is you guys do, and what problem you're solving in the world, and things like this. And then they'll tell you. And at this point, what I would want to do is then when they ask me that question, what do you do? I'd always want to answer with this framework. And you can customize it conversationally so that it makes sense for the person you're speaking to. And the framework is very easy. It's, what we do is, right? So that's how you start. So how when you stand in front of a group of people, right? And you've listened to this person speak, and you got something really compelling to tell them that will be important to them and can impact their business. Yet while you're speaking to them, all you see staring back at you is this bored person that's doesn't want to be there. Well, what we do is we make sure that never happens to you again. We were going to work with you in your material to make sure that you blah, 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 blah. And then we go through it that way. So I would always say, if you can frame everything relative to a problem that they have and use that as your starting point. So it's never about what you can do. It's always about, that problem that you have. And when you get them to nod, because between when you tell them the bit, and then you look at them, you know what I'm talking about. And when they nod back at you, then you say, okay, cool. Well, what we do is we make sure that doesn't happen to you again. Let me explain. And then they've already said, I give a shit about this. So we talk about audiences having gas tanks, give a shit tanks. And when you start speaking, their give a shit tank is empty. So that as quickly as possible, you got to fill the tank. So if you can get them to exist in a world in which there's a problem, that they realize, oh shit, yes, I do hate the idea that starting a business, you got this great idea for a business and the world needs it, yet there's so much frustration about getting it from past your first few clients to scale. What worked in the first few businesses doesn't seem to work at scale or length and things like this. Do you understand what I'm talking about? And does it like makes you want to pull your hair out? Yes. Well, what I do is I put the hair back in. Let me explain. And I would take it from there.
That's the succinct, amazing advice on being more persuasive that I was hoping to get from you. And it's so simple, but it's also, and the reason why I like that explanation is it's removing the script, right? It's about the fact that it's like you can analyze your customer segments and think about what are your typical pain points and problems, but it's more about like it's a conversation. It's like that problem you face when you. How did you phrase it again? Just mention again.
You know how when you.
Yeah. You know how when you are struggling to get your business to the next level because your managers won't take ownership and accountability and nothing seems to run without you being present, but you just want to focus on growth in the market. Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, what we do about that is X, Y, and Z.
And you can also say that. So, and a phrase that you and I both enjoy is freedom in a framework. So the framework is, what we do is the freedom is everything else you say.
Yes.
Now, if the colder you go into the conversation, the less freedom you have to make it about them, because then the more generic you've got to give. But if you've already asked them a bunch of things, you could say something like, well, actually, funny enough, you know how you just said that what you're doing is, well, what we do is, and then you got to, it's very similar. Like my first line in any sales meeting is always the same, and you'll see the similarity. So when we jump onto the call, I always explain the agenda and what we hope to achieve. I always tell them, at the end of the meeting, we're going to decide if we're going to do business together. I ask them if that sounds good. They say yes. And I say, well, just before we start though, I'm curious because I don't know why anybody would want to jump on a Zoom call with some stupid, like tattooed, half Scottish hooligan right now. So why did this feel like the right time for us to have this conversation? And then they'll tell you, why did this feel like the right time for us to have this conversation? There's two bits of information that are happening there. Number one, they're telling you that they need to have this conversation. There's a reason for it. And number two, they're telling you there's a reason for it now. That is a great starting point. And that gives you all the material you need for the how, when you. Because then I can say, okay, well, if I've heard you correctly, you said that you have A, B, C, D, and E. Well, I can't actually help you with E, but let me tell you how we are very, very positioned to help you with A, B, C. And then I go through it. So you know how, when, you, will, why, do is, just in a slightly different framework.
You've got this down to an art. One would think you do this as a business.
I know, it's crazy. One would think people would want it, but one would be incorrect because I've not figured it out yet.
So, and look, I think that's something that immediately grabbed my attention, because to this whole point about persuasion, you've got these frameworks and ability to do that. And you still probably tear your hair out at times is like, why do so many people still give such crappy presentations and such poor sales pitches and things like that? And like you facing this exact problem in terms of like, I feel like I need to convince more people that this is a problem that they have.
Right. And in fact, in the beginning, it was easier. We realized we were dealing all with executives at an executive level, which was perfect. And ego comes into play. So it's fantastic. Like our whole business mantra was around boredom slaying. Like if you stand up and you're in front of your staff and you're boring them, that is the antithesis of good leadership. As a leader, you need to be driving people to want to do things. We believe strongly in strategic destinations over strategies. Like, I don't have to tell you exactly how to get there. What I do have to tell you is strategically where we need to be. And if you buy into that, you will head that way as well and navigate around what you need to do. But that requires compelling, persuasive, eloquent leadership. And most leaders by default aren't. So when we're at the top of the food chain, people see it as important and they have the money. We talk about them being Demis. I reckon there's three archetypes you sell to: Nina, Lila, Demi. No influence, no authority; low influence, low authority; and desire, energy, money, and influence. These people are easy for us to sell to. The problem is there's a far bigger pool in Lila's, low influence, low authority, right? There's a bigger group there that we can sell lots and lots and lots of products to. The problem is their low influence and low authority means that it's a much, much tougher sell. I would argue it's easier to sell anything to a CEO than it is to sell, for me. Geez, I have 20 meetings with the head of HR and 1 meeting with a CEO.
Well, so I just looking at that low influence, low authority, I mean, the immediate frustration and pain that's sitting to me there is like, you know, you're a smart person, you know that you've got good thoughts and ideas to contribute to the business, but you feel like you get shut down all the time by middle management or executives in terms of squashing your ideas, and it's frustrating the hell out of you because you want to get it out there, but you don't feel like you have the influence and persuasiveness to be able to do that, right? You know how when this is what we do.
Yeah. So let's break it down what that is. If you're at the top of the food chain, right, you should, like you are in your business, if you see something that you had never thought about before, but it now lives rent-free in your brain, and you think about it and you want it, you'll find a reason to make it. You'll make the decision for the business. You'll say, actually, I never thought of that before, but you're right, that's what we need, let's buy it. If you go further down, generally speaking, our people aren't capable of making those decisions. They have to measure every decision against the KPI of sorts that they have, right? Or depending on whatever system you happen to follow that way. So they have a mandate. And one of the problems Missing Link has as a business is that the only person that has the mandate for make people better at presenting is maybe training. Right? Businesses don't have a chief presentation officer or a chief persuasion officer or whatever, like CPO you want to call it. And it's problematic because there's nothing of significance to me. You cannot name me anything of significance that didn't happen in a business after a presentation. Like if somebody presenting something, an idea, a concept, slides, whatever, to another human being is the driver of change. And yet we're so bad at it. And so until I can get people to put it as a KPI line item, these Lilas will always be difficult to sell to because their limited authority and limited influence is relative to budget boxes that they have. So if you can spend a budget that they have a KPI for, you'll win. If you have to try and create budget for this KPI, it's really difficult, not because they don't want it, just because they don't know where to put it. And I think that's a big mistake a lot of founders and salespeople make, is they're trying to sell to somebody that doesn't already sit with that shaped budget box on their, in their wallet.
Yeah, and that's I think the frustration is, as a business expense, it's quite hard to advocate for that unless it already exists outside of the training bucket. And what that leaves you is having to sell on the kind of one-to-one basis of direct to consumer, because it's like, well, if you want to be more influential in your career, if you've got leadership aspirations or entrepreneurial aspirations, you're going to need to be more persuasive, because, when you sit in a room and struggle to get your idea across knowing it's a good idea, don't you want that to end? Well, we help you do that. But then the point there is, instead of selling to the businesses and getting their managers more influential, it's the complexity of now going direct to these individuals.
100%. Yeah, it makes, and you know what, the world that we were in when I started Missing Link in 1997 was our distribution mechanism was word of mouth, and we're still kind of there. And I realized that the best word of mouth network was CEOs of large listed companies. So that was our business. We had a no entrepreneur policy until 2017. We would not work with entrepreneurs at all. Flat out refusal. And we can unpack that if you like. But for me, that was great. In the interim, though, there's a much better, much more efficient distribution platform, the internet, which makes B2C very, very possible. But we kind of jumped over that train, and now we're only realizing, hey, maybe that's a better route for us. But our brain is so stuck in that high budget big thing that the idea of selling something for, $50 is just, it's crazy to me. But it's a leap that I have to make. Like, this is an old dog that does need to learn new tricks.
Well, I mean, you're starting a totally different business. I mean, you're taking the capabilities of what's made you successful now, but you're moving it towards a different market segment. You're going to have to distribute in a different way, different processes, different forms of delivery. I'm excited. I think you're going to do it, and I don't think I won't even say I think you can do it. I think you will. It's just for, like, as you're saying, these challenges of changing a couple mindsets, treating it like a different business, and I think it's going to be like awesome when you can translate what it is that you've done to make CEOs highly persuasive and influential and give that to a mass market. That's going to be huge.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the vote of confidence, because in some ways, I'm less confident about it myself. And I'll tell you why, as a cautionary tale. I actually recently did a video on this, but just as a point, I think founders need to, I hate the idea of old 48-year-old dudes giving advice to younger startups. So all I can do is do an experience share. My experience share is generally for people. The one bit of advice I'm happy to give everybody about entrepreneurship, because I think it rings true 99% of the time, and that is, yesterday would have been easier, tomorrow will be harder. If all the things that you're telling yourself, oh, I'm waiting till I'm having children, or I'm waiting till I'm doing this, or I'm waiting till I'm married, I'm waiting till I'm more stable, none of that matters. It's actually easier to do it when it's harder, because the necessity to survive is big. So other than that, though, my gestalt would be, if I had the confidence and delusional self-belief at 48 that I had at 22, everything you said would be true, because I'd absolutely believe in myself, and I absolutely believe that I can change everything and do everything and do these things. And bear in mind, like, we got a good business and it's cool, but it's like a challenge. It's still a challenge, but I don't. And so I've lost some of that delusional self-belief with the knowledge I've gained. So as you grow in experience as a business owner, you inversely proportionate, you lose perspective and your ability and your delusional self-belief. And losing your perspective, you now know what you know, and losing your delusional self-belief are big problems. Like, I wish I could go back and get some of that again.
This podcast is brought to you by Metavolve, for founders who are committed to scaling their business, but are tired of wearing 12 different hats. For founders who want to focus on their next stage of growth, but are worried about their customer and employee satisfaction. Metavolve helps you build the structures, systems, and management team that you need to elevate yourself out of operations. It's time to free yourself up to focus on growth. Do it now with the entrepreneurial partners that put your customers and your people at the core of your scaling strategy. Metavolve, empowering leaders, evolving businesses. I would actually reframe it and say that I think in the process of losing that naivety that you did when you were beginning, you've realized and you've eaten all the humble pie to know how hard it is to start something new, grow it, and scale it. And with that awareness and knowledge and experience that you have that realization now. And this is the thing where a lot of naive business owners will get to. They've got a core business that does really well. They get super excited. They get into product or service or tech or something like that. They build another offering, not realizing that what they're doing is actually starting a whole new business. And what happens? 18 months down the line, they're in absolute chaos. They're spread too thin. Nothing's profitable anymore. That's not as easy as they thought it was. And now they're more stressed out than they were before. For you, it's the other way around. You know the risks that you're getting into. You know the complexity. You know the difficulty. So that the point there is, like, you're not being as gung-ho as is necessary to start a startup from scratch, but to expand a business into more than one market segment. I think what you're doing is perfect, the mindset that you have. And I think that it's more just the only question I have is that frustration high enough for you to be able to still pursue this new venture in order to expand it with the risk aversion to know that it's going to be successful and profitable?
So that's what I wanted to say to you. When when I started Missing Link originally, I'd quit my job. I was working at Gear House. I'd quit my job. I was still living at home. I had no debt. I had 1 month's salary. I'd been kind of moonlighting for 6 months. So we already had 6 employees and we'd started it, and I quit, and I knew I'd be relatively okay. Within like a month and a half, my parents moved to me and said, listen, we want to be near, my sisters had both had kids. They lived in Cape Town. We want to be near that. We can both work from anywhere. We're going to move down to the Cape. You need to buy a house. So then I had to buy my own home. I was super young. I just started a business. I became a homeowner at 22, maybe 23 by then. I think probably still 22. And I was like, oh, wow. So now I can't fail. So now failure was not an option. The problem is, as you go on, and in subsequent businesses that I've started and run, you do have a safety blanket. Because no matter what happens, like Missing Link is a good company. We're a great company, and we're a good business. Like it's fine. But so it's harder to make those changes because the pain isn't there. That's why we did so well during the pandemic. During the pandemic, we went to revenue zero. I had to turn on that old 22-year-old self of mine. And by the September, even though there was no live events, no live presentations, we'd had our best revenue in, at the time, 23 years. So you need some of that. And that's what you do lose when you get older.
And I mean, yeah, the way that I would frame it in terms of change is, and where I really loved the way that this conversation started was around frustration, right? Is the change requires a lot of energy. And where does that energy come from? Frustration is a very useful place to generate that energy from. But the other one is a sense of urgency. And you mentioned COVID
Yes.
there as a prime example, and having a house and having to make things work gives you that sense of urgency in terms of like I need to make this happen. So that's the only other thing to think about now is like going off to the B2C route with your business, or to more of a mass market, essentially lower price but broader market. What's your sense of urgency to do that? And the thing is, right now, on the way you're thinking is there isn't really one, because the business is doing pretty well. It's quite profitable. It's relatively stable. There's no we don't need to do this.
Well, it's stable insofar as that, consistently every month clients come to us and, they'll buy stuff from us, and it's great. But we're as a business, we reset our, every 3 months I would be bankrupt. If we stop selling 3 months from now, like we will always be bankrupt. Whereas, it'd be nice to have a business that generally speaking, there is a flow of information, marketing. If you spend X amount of marketing, you'll get this many leads, you'll convert this many leads, and then you'll sell this many widgets, and then that many widgets will, keep the lights on. So it would be nice to do that. And I think there is a sense of urgency, more because of the frustration of this Groundhog Day style business. This also comes back to leadership styles, by the way, and it's something that I think I'm a wartime leader. That's what I'm built for. That's what I need. And luckily, I have a professional leadership team and a phenomenal managing director in Sam Janssen. She's amazing. And, she's also my sense check. We kind of work with that EOS visionary and integrator model, where the integrator gets the final votes. I'll be like, Sam, I've got this idea. I'm like so excited. And she'll be like, no. And it's a good thing, because she knows what can we make happen. But I do realize, and one of the things for me is, I am not a day-to-day, I'm not a status quo leader. I'll tell you what, the problem is money isn't going to make my life better. So I'm not motivated by making more money, right? So I don't, we have a good enough life. It would be nice to fly business class more or something like, but generally speaking, no debt, life is good. Everything's amazing. And I'm not impressed by people's fast cars. I bought a Porsche in my early 30s. I realized I was on a douchebag curve. I sold it and I've got a Vespa. None of those things move me. So making more money simply isn't a motivation for me. I think scale and growth for the sake of growth is the mindset of cancer. It's not something that we all need to do. If you own your own business, you can choose what enough is, and we are very, very happy with the size of business we are. But let me tell you what my frustration is you hit on it right at the beginning. And that is that I have created purpose in the problem that I'm solving. We want to help ordinary people be more persuasive, deliver more persuasive presentations, because I think it can change their life. And I don't think I'm making a mark on that. So now I'm getting to thinking about the legacy, the idea of, did I actually change anything at a macro scale? Like, have I made the world a better place as a result of quarter of a century running a business? And at the moment, I don't think I have, but I'd like to. And I think I still have time in the game to do that.
What's resonating for me there is that so many entrepreneurs go through this journey of what's the value that I'm adding and doing it sustainably. And that was your first question, right? And that's something that you've now solved. But now that you've got to that point and it's very clear the value that you're adding, it's, I wouldn't necessarily say going full circle, but it's that next evolution in terms of what is the impact I'm now making? What is the contribution? And that is value scaled. And I think that's what you're trying to figure out now in terms of how can you turn this value that you know and have proven that you can add consistently over time to people that are already in influential positions and make them more persuasive. So how do you do it almost the other way around? How do you put people in less influential positions and make them more influential at scale? And that's the impact and contribution that you want to make.
Nailed it. That's exactly what we want to do. And it's tricky because our model was built on top down. And it's still our easiest way, fun enough. We've realized last year we tried to go bottom up. We've realized that in our case, the easiest way to get to the people at the bottom is to start at the top and make them want to make their people better. But we do want to solve for the other, independents coming to us. And that is exactly what excites my team as well. That is our victory condition as a business, our strategic destination, is that we actually want to change the world's relationship with presentation and persuasion. Like, persuasion is seen as a bad word, but it's not. Being persuasive is very, very, very powerful. And it's not manipulative. It's just you being able to get your ideas out to the world in such a way that the world wants to take action. It's a force for good.
And I fully agree. If you look at anyone other people will talk about sales, and there's no business that's ever succeeded without sales. But I'd take it one step further, or to a higher level, is no business has succeeded without persuasion. No person
100%.
has succeeded without persuasion. And if you want to be a success in your life in any way or form, however you define success, you need to learn to be persuasive. And at least maybe a first stepping point is you've got to learn to at least be passionate. So let's take this now and think about like contribution and impact. It's like, where would someone start if they want to be more persuasive?
So passion is a key ingredient of persuasion, right? Like, as a start, like, your own give a shit tank has to be full. We always say one of the fundamental rules of presentation, and I would argue persuasion generally, is that your audience can never enjoy receiving a presentation more than you enjoy delivering it. If you're bored of your messaging and unenthusiastic, and we listen to some people's sales calls when we do breakdowns and things like that, and you realize, this person's give a shit tank isn't full. Your audience cannot have a fuller give a shit tank than you do. If you're trying to persuade something about somebody that you feel like, I'm a 3 out of 10 on this thing, you can't get more than a 3 out of 10 for them. Ironically, funnily enough, honestly, 100% honestly, learned this watching a sex show in Amsterdam. Like, I realized, they just don't want to be here. And it's the least sexy thing ever. You get like a direction. Like, there's no chance of no one leaves the sex show in Amsterdam wanting to shag. And I realized, wow, you can't, if they're not enjoying it, I can't enjoy watching it. And that's the high point for everything. So your first point is, we do have to get to the root cause of, like, do I want it? Do I want to persuade people on this? Am I excited about it? And the way to get to that is to ask yourself, why? Why do I care? Now, I think that if it always just comes down to, because I'll make more money, I do genuinely think that it's not enough. The money, there's a great quote by a guy, Mike Basile. He's an EO member from Dallas. And he says, it's not about the money till you know what it's about, then it's about the money. And it's the idea that if you can figure out what it is, if the money should always be the if this, then that. So because I solve this for them, then they're going to pay us and I'm going to make money. How cool is that?
Money's the result.
Yes. And so if you can be passionate about the change you want to make that is the result, then you're in good shape. And I think that can evolve. This is why I go back to it not being an underlying purpose, but a generated purpose based on where you are right now and the problem you can solve in the world.
Yeah, I absolutely love that.
And then, sorry, just the second part to your question is it's learnable. You can absolutely learn to be more persuasive. There's, you could read Cialdini, you could read Aristotle's On Rhetoric, or Cicero's How to Win an Argument, Jay Heinrich's Thank You for Arguing. These are phenomenal resources as a starting point. Just consuming the Blinkist for Jay Heinrich's Thank You for Arguing will immediately make you a better conversationalist instantly.
Noted. I'm adding that to my list instantly. Rich, I think if I had to, because there's so much value from this conversation that I'm taking away with, I'm like, even talking to you, I'm trying to I got to remember this stuff and I got to re-listen to this straight afterwards. But I think just for the listeners now, a couple tips in terms of, if you want to be more persuasive straight away, like the one that's stood out for me, just engaging in free flow conversation is, how when we do this, like that stuck with me instantly. What are some other things that, if these are the last couple minutes, like you would ever have to have the opportunity to make me just that little bit more persuasive? What else would you tell me?
Okay, so let's understand and when I say presentation, I use presentation as the idea of let me frame this for you. To deliver a message, to evoke an emotion, to achieve a desired result. That for me is what presentation is. It's not stand on a stage with slides behind me. That's a version of it. So to deliver a message, to evoke an emotion, to achieve a desired result. What's important to understand, first of all, is that the message's job is to evoke the emotion. The emotion's job is to achieve the result. You can't skip that. We used to always say to deliver a message, to achieve a result. But that only appeals. Aristotle spoke about 3 appeals when you're trying to persuade somebody of anything. Have you heard of them?
Remind me.
There's logos, pathos, ethos. Logos is an appeal to reason. I'm giving you reasonable information. You're like, that makes sense. That checks out. Pathos is an appeal to emotion. So you're saying, okay, yeah, I care about this enough. And ethos is an appeal to authority. I trust you, Cameron. You sound like a dude who, and it comes from a number of different things. It could be, because you are a very likable human being. Like we've chatted twice, and you really are. That's part of your ethos. So I want to say it's not just your authority in what you say. It's also you're the kind of person that people want to listen to. Okay, so ethos. You can never persuade anybody with 2 of the 3. It's not one of those pick 2, you can only have 2. No. If you're speaking to somebody, you're giving them information about a topic they care about, but they don't trust you, you lose. If they trust you and they care about the topic, but you're not giving them anything to do with it, any information, any logos, well, then, you're just a motivational speaker. A waste of energy. You're like a sugar rush. And if they trust you, and you're giving them big information, but it's about macroeconomics and that's just not your thing, well, then you're not going to take any of it away. You're going to check out. Logos, pathos, ethos, an easy way to think about it is head, heart, and gut. So the first thing, when you're sitting there and you're mapping out, what do I want to say tonight? Give some thought to, how do I, I would start with heart. Why should they care? Okay. Then I would start with, why should they trust me? And then I would go to, what do I need to tell them? And then the final thing that I would do, because Aristotle was missing something, and that is, what action do I need them to take? You've got to have that implicitly or explicitly. And so for us, when it comes to persuasion, there is 4 stepping stones that you've got to get across. And we refer to this as the action framework, because our goal is never to persuade you, it's to get you to take an action. The persuasion is the thing that drives people to take action. So anytime that there's something you need people to do, you want to walk them across these 4 stepping stones. Now, I would suggest at the beginning you do it in order, but later as you get better, you can shuffle the order. And the stepping stones are so easy. The action framework, 4 steps. Give them a reason to care. So fill the give a shit tank. Step number 2, give them a reason to believe. So you care about this topic now. Why should you trust me talking about it? Once we've established that you care and you trust me, well, then I can take a more, I want to say, forceful or authoritative position. So I'm moving from giving to telling. Step number 3, stepping stone 3 is tell them what they need to know. Here's the information. Here are the 3 things that you need to understand right now about why your startup isn't scaling. Right? This is it. Like, if you believe me on A, B, and C, I promise you it will change. Now, if you can make those rhyme, communicate, accelerate, and, reiterate. Ooh, it must be true. Okay. And then step number 4 is the one that people miss. And this is the most important one. This is going to get them onto the land at the other side. And that is, tell them what they need to do. The most important thing that I want people to remember here is that when it's tell them what they need to do, I don't want you to think about the stepping stones analogy. It's actually very good. It's not about how do I get them across the river. It's how do I get them just to step onto the first pond, onto the first stone. So anytime you want somebody to do something, get yourself to a point where you're getting them to make a decision that is a step in the correct direction. At this point, human beings' consistency bias will kick in because we like to be consistent to things we've done. One of my favorite examples to finish this is Al Gore in Inconvenient Truth. At the end of that Inconvenient Truth, where he spoke about the world's, going to shit and it's all falling apart, he said there's something you can do, and it's super easy. All you have to do is next time you're going to replace your light bulb, do it with an energy-saving bulb. If you do this, blah, 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 blah. And of course, what happens when you start using energy-saving bulbs, you're more likely to recycle and turn the water off while you're showering and do these things because of consistency. So the smallest single step. One more time, give them a reason to care, give them a reason to believe, tell them what they need to know, tell them what they need to do.
And you've just done all of that exactly for me. If we just look at this podcast structure from when I mentioned my situation now, how when you go to networking events with people in your target market and you struggle to get your message across about what it is that you're trying to do, that I know that's a frustrating feeling and evoking the emotion of, but wouldn't you like to feel confident in that situation, know that you're engaging them and getting their give a shit tank full, right? So these are the 4 steps that you do to do this. And the immediate action that Cameron's going to take immediately after doing this is re-listen to that and actually answer all of those questions. And then it's slowly but surely become a bit more persuasive. Rich, I think that's an awesome place to end. So thank you. I've just got to do my trademark question of what's the one question that I haven't asked you that I should have asked you that you'd like to answer now?
What made you decide to become a public speaker, and why do you think it's a missing trick that most people are ignoring?
Yeah, would love to hear the answer to that.
The answer goes back to a little bit about what I said before about the authority play. Gaining authority nowadays is very, very difficult. We talk about influencers, but influencers are to do with sheer number of watching, but their influence is based on scale or across audience. So I've got one video that was on Goalcast that was watched 21 million times. That makes me quite, you could make a joke about being an influencer, but actually my authority with each of those people is low. They've got one small interaction with me. And so high influence in terms of reach, but low authority in terms of, I guess, frequency. For me, public speaking, I realized was an amazing trick because I had a captive audience. I had a high authority space because people naturally look up to people on a stage. That's your given. People expect, because you're there, that's why a lot of people are disappointed by bad presentations, because we're kind of thinking, oh, wow, you're in an authority position. And then, oh, no, you're shit. So a high authority position and you have high attention. So, for example, last week I was doing a talk on rhetoric and public speaking in Greece, walking distance from the Agora of Athens, where where Socrates and Plato and Aristotle had literally stood and created this space. And to get a chance to present there for 3 hours to a captive audience, every one of whom was a potential client, is massive. And yet I see business people and entrepreneurs not understanding the power of stage marketing, the high authority, lower reach, as opposed to a high reach, low authority form of influence. And I think it's a missing trick. And I guess my plea, and you don't have to come to us, there are many, many companies around the world who can help you with this, but my plea is that entrepreneurs find a problem they want to solve in the world. Find something you want to say that's counterintuitive or counter narrative. Don't just say the shit that everybody says. And for goodness sake, don't tell me your story. I don't care. Your story is only important insofar as it has a point. But find this counterintuitive, counter narrative idea and go find a stage for it and present on it and become the thought leader in that space. If you do that, when people find and fall in love and agree with you about the dragon you're trying to slay, well, then, you're off to the races.
Yeah, what an inspirational ending. Rich, thank you so much for being on the Founder Files. I can't wait to listen to this more than once myself. And yeah, all the best with your B2C play.
Thanks, Cameron. I really appreciate it.
It's so interesting to review this episode 3 months after it's actually been recorded, but it's just really reinforced for me why I was so excited to wait deliberately for our move to YouTube before sharing this episode with Richard. And that's just because of how valuable this information is. And the reason why I can say that confidently is because my own experience over the past 3 months. A lot about what I'm going to share now to summarize the conclusion of this episode are things that I've actually been doing, things that I've actually been quoting Rich on to other people, and what I've been implementing, and it's become second nature. And I've seen the differences in my confidence in conversations, in the outcomes of those conversations. And yeah, it's definitely, it's a nice feeling to say like this was the right episode to pick for YouTube. But without blowing smoke up my own ass, let me go back to the summary of this. And the first point is your give a shit tank needs to be fuller than your audience or your customers or whoever it is that you're speaking to. And the point is that their give a shit tank is never going to be as full as yours. And if you are not evoking passion, if you're not showing a serious care about what it is that you're doing, they are not going to be as engaged with what you're talking about. And the reason why is if you go back to that simple process and framework about needing to convey a message clearly, so they obviously understand what you're talking about, evoking an emotion, and both of those in order to persuade action, right? And in terms of that evoking emotion, that's where the give a shit tank is such a critical element in terms of making sure that they can care almost as much as you do. And a point around passion that I found super interesting and very insightful is the fact that it's not just about purpose. And speaking a lot about purpose, we know Simon Sinek, we've all heard about, start with why, which for the record, I still believe in. But what I find very interesting and what I've applied recently in my thinking is the frustration elements. What frustrates you? What pisses you off about the thing that you're trying to persuade other people about, besides the fact that you struggle to potentially persuade them? But the point there is using that frustration to fuel your passion is what is going to help evoke emotion more effectively so that you can then persuade them to take action, because that is the whole point of persuasion at the end of the day. And just a quick summary there: convey the message, evoke an emotion in order to persuade action. And another reminder that I got from that was the simple framework, again, that I've been using quite a bit is, what we do is this. And the great thing in my reflection of doing that is the fact that it hasn't ever felt salesy. It's just been around the point is, how can I take this quite intangible and comprehensive consulting work and coaching work that we do, and how do I make it relevant to you? So by understanding your business and having a conversation about what's actually happening in the context, it's not about the fact that I'm necessarily trying to sell. It's more around, okay, how do I make this understandable and relevant to your current context? So when you tell me something about what's going on, I say, okay, well, yeah, you know how when you do that, well, what we do is X, Y, and Z. It makes the conversation a lot simpler. Nothing's ever really scripted. It feels like it's more organic, and it's actually been very helpful and useful and persuasive. So those are the main things that I got from this. It's fascinating to see that they've actually been implemented over the past 3 months, and it's just reinforced the value that Richard can add in such a short amount of time. So if that's what he can do here, imagine actually working with him. But my job here is not to sell on his behalf. But thank you very much for listening to this episode. I hope that you found this very useful, and thank you very much for watching this first episode of the Founder Files on YouTube. You know what's coming next, and if you like this, you enjoyed it, please subscribe, please follow, please like, all the things that you do to help the podcast. But yeah, if you want to really follow this journey as moving to YouTube and speaking to some really exciting pioneering thinkers and entrepreneurs, this is the place to be. So thank you very much, and I'll see you next week.